it's a kind of human nature in a way that we kind of single out people who we identify as not being whoever it is that we think we are and pick on them. And it's not one of the nicest parts of human nature. In fact, it's something that I think civilization is designed to help us overcome. And a fully avowed person is able to look at every other person square in the eye and take them for who they are without bringing along all kinds of baggage about secondary categories. But here's a movie about a popular young high school student, a girl who is doing very well. As a teenager in high school, when something happens to cause her to have to re-examine her relationship with herself and with her family and with her society, it's extremely thought-provoking. It is so encouraging to see intelligent, caring, passionate filmmakers who look at teenagers who are the future and listen to them and try to portray them in a way that not only helps us understand them, but even more importantly, because this movie's primary audience, I'm sure, is one of its primary audiences, certainly teenagers, helps them to understand themselves. So this is Maryam.
This is Ramin Serry, the director, and Shauna Lyon, the producer. You know, one thing, seeing it again, and I realized this the first time, this is a very professional film. The acting is of a very high standard. All of the credits, the screenplay is very, very well constructed to involve all of these disparate elements and get them all to work. Performances, the music, all works. It doesn't look like a film that is by a first feature director. You've made short subjects. It's your first feature film. It looks very self-confident and assured. What was the genesis of this film? How did it begin to develop in your minds?
Well, obviously it's a very personal story. At the time of the hostage crisis, I was younger than the character of Mariam. I was about 8 years old, 9 years old, and so I understood even less than the character of Mariam at the time. And yet the ridicule that I was subjected to lasted through junior high years and changed my personality. I always felt a stigma attached to my cultural identity, being Iranian. I never felt as though I quite fit in because of, such a traumatic experience. And it was only when I became a young adult and into my college years that, of course, naturally being separated for the first time from my parents, I started to yearn for a connection to them, my extended family, and the culture, and try to understand who I am in this society, and I could trace everything back to these events of 1979. And then speaking with other Iranians in the United States, I started to realize that there were all these stories that people had and were telling me one-on-one, but were similarly ashamed to make public. And I realized that this is a story that millions of Iranians share. No matter where they were in the world, they were affected by this event. And I wanted to preserve this piece of history, which I felt was so important for everyone in the United States, and present it with an optimistic point of view, and a sober point of view, one that highlighted the humanism in each of the characters and any of the characters, no matter what side of the political spectrum they might be on.
Singling out members of various ethnic minorities and persecuting them or ridiculing them is an ancient American tradition. I was reminded today watching the film, and I didn't think of this before today. My father was born in 1902 here in Champaign-Urbana, and his parents were from Germany. And of course, then we were in the First World War. And within one day, his parents stopped speaking German at home and pulled him out of the Lutheran school. And because suddenly, if you were German at that time, you were the enemy. And it really affected him, and he talked about it twice or three times to me and never any other time. But it's just, you go on and on with ethnic and racial groups in America, and you find, for goodness sake, if we're not Native Americans, none of us came from here. And what the hell kind of point are we trying to prove? Because we all got off the boat You know, every single one of us did, and we're all in this boat together. And you know, when I see a film like this, it brings tears to my eyes because I'm sure it did really affect you, although also it gave you a subject for a film. But on the other hand, that wasn't a consolation when you were a kid in school. Are there questions from the audience? We have microphones both above and below. Put up your hand and somebody will find you with a microphone.
My question is, how much did the film cost to make, and how did you raise funding for it?
They won't tell you. Let me.
We can't actually
They
tell
never
you
will.
that. It was less than $10 million. And
It was less than $1 million.
okay, it was less than $1 million. And we raised the money privately through family and friends.
And as an unproven director with no track record, fresh out of film school, I can tell you that that's usually the situation. It's very difficult. And the subject matter was such a difficult sell. I had a professor who read the script and said, you know, it's really great, but you're never going to get anybody to invest any money in it because you've got Iranians as the stars. And this is like my most, you know, trusted professor. So I was determined to prove him wrong. And
You know, the one thing that you also proved, probably to the relief of your investors, is that you really can make a good movie. And this would also be very important, I think, in terms of your next projects, because you can show this to anyone and they know that they're dealing with professionals. Yeah.
We'd like to say that we really enjoyed your film. I'm over here.
It's always funny because we can always hear you, but we never know where you are.
We're over here. And your casting was absolutely superb. But what we'd like to know is how long did it take to make the film?
We started pre-production in June of 1998, and then we shot the film for 25 days in October of 98. Then we edited for a while, and then we took a hiatus to look for some more money. We finished the film in December of 1999.
One thing I mentioned in my review from Hawaii is that you didn't turn the parents into broad stereotypes. I mean, it is a cliche in other movies with similar themes, not Iranian necessarily, but of any film where the parents are first generation tends to caricature them into rigid, unyielding, old-fashioned, out-of-touch people. These people are essentially very reasonable, and they love their daughter, and they care for her, and they're a little strict, you know, but it's okay to be a little strict. I found that it was very interesting, the humanity that you brought to those two characters.
I think that much of that is based on the relationship that I have with my parents, and also that my dad had final script approval.
Are you just saying that because they're in the audience? Why don't you introduce them?
My parents are sitting near the rear. That's if you guys could stand up. That's my father, Dr. Cyrus Serry, and my mother, Dr.
Shauna, you must have some relatives
My
here.
mother is here. Where's my mom? Hello,
Tish
Mom.
Lyon. She's
There she is. And my aunt, Mariam, is here as well. My aunt, I don't know where she's sitting, but hi.
We want to ask you to come back at 7 o'clock for Such a Long Journey and at 10 o'clock for Stories from the Second Floor, and all day Friday and Saturday and Sunday too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations once again.